Your husband's waiting for his dinner, starving, and here you are chatting away on your computer for who knows how long. Must be nice, huh?
My husband, Tucker, came into my room, making no effort to hide his irritation, and spoke to me in a low voice. I was in the middle of a remote meeting. Staring at him wouldn't help, especially since I couldn't let our clients hear this conversation.
I said I'm hungry. Why are you ignoring me? Stop wasting time on pointless talk and get my food ready.
As I quickly moved to mute my microphone, I heard his heavy footsteps approaching.
Don't you dare ignore your master, you slave.
A sharp pain shot through my leg. He kicked my right foot and was still pressing down on it. I recently broke that foot. Even with my cast still on, he paid no mind and kept kicking me. With a scowl of pure contempt, he pointed toward the kitchen. All he ever seemed to care about was his next meal. I turned to address Tucker. My name is Violet. I work as a company employee. I met Tucker through work when I was 26, and that's when we began dating. He is 10 years older than me, and I was drawn to the calmness and generosity that came with his age. While we were dating, Tucker was always kind, and we hardly ever argued. Without any major issues, we decided to marry 2 years after we started dating. On the day we registered our marriage, I felt happiness like never before. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to call it the best day of my life. However, Tucker's attitude changed completely from the very next day. That day, I left work late because of overtime, quickly did some grocery shopping, and rushed home. When I arrived, Tucker was already home, relaxing on the couch and watching TV.
I'm back. Tucker, you're already home. I bought some groceries, so I'll hurry and make dinner.
When I greeted him, he turned to me with an irritated expression.
You're late. You're just starting to cook now? I'm starving here. Hurry up.
Hearing such words from Tucker, something I'd never experienced before, I couldn't help but question if I'd heard correctly. Before we got married, we had already been living together, and if I was late because of overtime while Tucker got home early, he would always prepare dinner for us without a second thought. When I thanked him, Tucker would always say with a gentle smile.
It's nothing since we both work.
However, standing in front of me was a completely different Tucker. Come to think of it, earlier today, I had messaged Tucker saying,
I might be late because of overtime.
But he had only read it without replying. Before we married, he'd reply with something like,
I think I'll leave my office on time, so I'll make dinner.
or,
I might be late too. Should we order delivery or eat out tonight?
Puzzled by Tucker's sudden shift in attitude, I tried to maintain my composure and asked him indirectly.
Hey, Tucker. You seem different today. Did something happen?
With a blatantly annoyed look, he responded with something unbelievable.
We're married now, so I don't need to treat you nicely anymore.
What?
I stood there, stunned, unable to comprehend what he'd just said. Seeing my reaction, Tucker burst out laughing, clearly enjoying himself.
Like I said, I was only nice to you because we weren't married yet, but now that we are, I've got the upper hand. Starting today, you're my slave. This is non-negotiable.
What are you saying?
I was dumbfounded by his words.
Oh, and by the way, the laundry isn't brought in and the bathroom's not cleaned. Obviously, you're doing all of that. And dinner better be ready in 20 minutes. Don't just stand there, get moving.
He yelled at me, then turned back to the TV, completely ignoring me. In a confused daze, I managed to finish the household chores. I was hungry, too, after a long day of work, so I thought I'd try to calm down by focusing on making dinner. However, when the meal was finally ready, Tucker complained that the flavor was too bland and tasteless. When I did laundry, he would get angry and say he didn't like the way I folded the clothes. Once things finally settled down a bit, he demanded that I give him a massage. I was exhausted, both physically and mentally, but I couldn't refuse under his high-handed attitude, so I went along with his orders. Instead of feeling anger at his terrible behavior, I was mostly bewildered by how much he had changed. Even after I somehow managed to massage him, he still complained, saying,
"You're too weak. You're terrible at this."
He continued to treat me the same the next day and the day after that. I hoped that possibly he'd revert to the kind Tucker I once knew, but there wasn't a trace of that happening. Unable to bear my husband's repeated mistreatment, I naturally began to think about divorce. Since both of my parents had passed away in an accident around the time I started working, I had no family to rely on. I had also sold my family home when I married, so I had nowhere to go. Although we hadn't held a wedding ceremony, we'd spent quite a bit on moving expenses and buying appliances. If I left right now, I'd have to stay in a hotel until I could find a place to live, and I had no idea how much that would cost. Therefore, I decided to start preparing for divorce discreetly, planning to secure a new place before confronting Tucker and leaving this home. From then on, Tucker verbally abused me every single day. No matter what I did, he'd lash out, always saying things like,
"I'm disciplining a worthless wife for your own good."
One time, he came home late without any notice of when he'd return, so I ate dinner and took a bath before he got back. As soon as he returned home, he lashed out.
"How dare you eat without me? A woman should wait for her man to come home and get in the bath after me. Can't believe you're that clueless. What a worthless wife you are."
His words were so outrageous that I almost snapped back, but I forced myself to stay quiet, determined to keep up the charade until I could leave. I kept telling myself, it's just until I'm ready to move into the new place, like a mantra. This continued until some time later. That morning, Tucker yelled at me from the start.
"Hey, my shirt's all wrinkled. Can't you even iron properly, you lousy wife?"
The other day, exhausted, I'd forgotten to iron his shirt before going to sleep. As he continued to berate me, I felt a surge of self-loathing for letting him get this way, but I hurried to iron his shirt and got myself ready for work. When I opened the door, I saw it was raining outside. Since we lived on the second floor of an apartment building, I usually took the stairs. I walked the familiar route, but on the wet stairs, I lost my footing and tumbled all the way down to the ground floor, with my body hitting every step along the way. A piercing pain shot through my leg, so severe that I realized it was no ordinary injury. Just then, I saw Tucker emerge from the entrance, so I called out for help.
Tucker. I fell and hurt my leg. I can't move, it hurts so much.
He glanced at me briefly and grimaced.
"I'm gonna be late for work because I was waiting for you to iron my shirt. You'll be fine. I'm going to the office."
With a loud sigh, Tucker walked right past me without another glance.
No way.
Tears of disappointment and pain began to flow as I watched him leave. One of the neighbors on the first floor, hearing the commotion, came to check on me and ended up calling an ambulance. Tests revealed that I had broken my right leg. I had to undergo surgery and wear a cast, leading to a few weeks of hospitalization until I was well enough to recover at home. During my hospital stay, Tucker visited me only once, and it wasn't out of concern, it was just to complain.
Getting surgery and being hospitalized just for a broken bone? That's over the top. You're my slave, so get back home and start doing the chores. Honestly, I only came because you called my office and someone there said I should go see you. After causing me all this trouble, you don't even have an apology for me?
After spitting out those words, he left without listening to a thing I said. As I'd expected, Not a single word of concern came out of his mouth. I only called his office because no matter how many times I tried his cell, I couldn't get through. I figured if I didn't let him know I'd be away from home for a while, he'd be furious, so I thought it best to inform his workplace. Despite sighing repeatedly, I found life without Tucker around to be surprisingly stress-free and peaceful. With renewed determination to go through with the divorce as soon as I was discharged, I focused on my recovery. When I was finally discharged and returned home, it was a mess. Tucker seemed to have done almost no housework while I was away. Even though I'd expected this, I couldn't believe he managed to live in such disarray. I still had my cast on and wouldn't be able to remove it for about a week, so I couldn't move around as freely as I'd like. Still, I slowly started tidying up. My company had understood my situation when I was hospitalized, so they allowed me to work remotely, as commuting would have been difficult with my leg. A few days after returning home, I was in the middle of a remote meeting when Tucker opened the door and walked in slowly.
Your husband's waiting for his dinner, starving, and here you are, chatting away on your computer. Must be nice, huh?
I couldn't let our client hear this, so I glared up at him, which made him flush with anger.
What's with that look?
He shouted. Knowing it was hopeless, I reached for the mouse to mute my mic, but he stomped toward me with heavy steps.
Don't you dare ignore your master, slave.
With those words, he kicked my right leg. Furthermore, he even pressed hard on my cast, putting his full weight on it.
Hey, slave, get dinner in the bath ready now. Move it, you idiot.
While he was shouting, he kept kicking my leg. Not fully healed, my leg throbbed with pain, and I groaned in agony.
Not only did you inconvenience me, but now you're flirting with other men. You still don't know who owns you, do you?
At that moment, my meeting partner's voice cut in sharply, directed at Tucker.
Is that all you have to say?
Tucker froze and turned toward the computer screen, where he saw the face of my meeting partner.
Huh? You are.
Tucker's expression shifted to one of shock and fear as he recognized the man on the screen. It was Bob, my client from the company we were meeting with.
Bob, are you saying you are in the meeting?
Tucker stammered in a trembling voice. As it turned out, there was a business relationship between my company and Tucker's company, and Bob was Tucker's direct supervisor. With a voice that clearly conveyed anger and disappointment, Bob addressed Tucker.
Yes, this is indeed a meeting. I'm told you're on family leave to care for your wife, who's recovering from a broken leg and facing daily challenges. But from where I'm sitting, it doesn't look that way.
His voice conveyed such anger and disappointment that it was palpable even through the screen. Tucker had been taking leave from work under the pretense of taking care of me, yet he'd spent his days lounging around the house, watching TV. Far from assisting with my care, he hadn't even done basic housework, using his time off solely to idle at home.
No way. I've been taking care of her properly. I just lost my temper because she was ignoring me to talk to another guy.
Sweating profusely, Tucker tried to make up an excuse, but Bob shook his head slowly.
Do you really think anyone would believe that excuse? What you do within your home isn't our business. But taking family leave under false pretenses is unacceptable.
Bob fixed Tucker with a stern gaze, then told him to leave the room immediately, as he was interrupting the meeting. Pale-faced, Tucker stumbled out of the room. Bob and I agreed to reschedule the meeting for another day. He warned me that Tucker might resort to violence out of rage, and I thanked Bob before ending the call. Realizing the call had ended, Tucker stormed back in, furious, and started yelling at me.
What are you going to do if this ruins my reputation? I was just about to get a promotion. If this ruins it, it's all your fault. Don't drag me down, you worthless slave.
In the past, I would have been terrified, apologizing profusely and waiting for him to calm down. However, what I saw earlier gave me strength. Remembering how Tucker had trembled like a newborn fawn in front of Bob, I felt that now was my only chance. I sighed loudly enough for him to hear and spoke in a cold voice.
Let's get a divorce.
I had already found a new place and planned to bring up divorce today or tomorrow. Tucker looked momentarily shocked, but then burst into mocking laughter.
Divorce? Where do you think you're going to go? You've got no family, no one to rely on. You'll live as my slave, there's no escape. Now, if you have time to joke around, go tell Bob I'm not at fault here.
This isn't a joke. I'd never choose to live as your slave. I made up my mind to divorce you long ago, and I've been preparing for it. So, let's end this. Please divorce me.
As I spoke calmly, Tucker's face turned red with rage as he realized I was serious.
You think you can pull this on me? I'll never agree to a divorce. Why do you think I treated you well for 2 years while we were dating? I finally got a slave. I'm not letting you go. You want to get kicked again?
If you refuse the divorce, I'll send a recording of your threats to Bob. It won't just be your promotion at risk. Your company takes compliance seriously.
What? Wait, are you saying you recorded this?
His eyes widened in shock.
Yes, but I won't tell you where I hid the recorder. I wouldn't want you to take it from me. And if you try to force it out of me, I'll call the police immediately.
I met his gaze and firmly stated my stance. After a moment of silence, he sneered and snapped back.
Fine. I don't want to stay with someone like you anyway. We'll get a divorce. You've got a few days leave by then. I'll stay at a hotel in the meantime, so make sure you're gone by the time I'm back.
With those words, he stormed out of the house. I let out a sigh of relief, smiling as I murmured,
Thank goodness. I can finally get divorced.
The truth was, I hadn't recorded anything. Since Tucker resisted the divorce more than I'd expected, that bluff was something I came up with on the spot. However, it worked, and knowing I'd successfully secured the divorce filled me with relief. Over the next few days, I packed up my belongings. During that time, the cast was finally removed, and I managed to sign a lease on the new place I'd had in mind. I left a note on the table in our home and moved out completely. Not long after, I received a message from Tucker that read,
Our divorce was finalized, and I'm glad to be rid of a lousy woman like you. Just to be clear, don't you dare send that recording to Bob or anyone else.
I blocked Tucker without replying and set my phone to reject any calls from him. With that, my short marriage to Tucker came to an end. He probably just wanted a slave he could control. He must have thought that since I didn't have any family, I'd have no choice but to obey him once we were married. During our relationship, I never saw his true colors.
If only I'd realized it before marrying him.
I was frustrated with myself for not seeing through him. I thought to myself that I was done with romance for a while. About 3 months passed after my divorce from Tucker was finalized. My leg was fully healed, and I was back to commuting to work every day. That day, like any other, I finished my work and left the office. As I walked a short distance from the building, I heard someone call out.
Violet.
Startled, I turned around to see a man with a pale, gaunt face standing there. Huh? Tucker? At first, I didn't recognize him, but sure enough, it was Tucker. He used to look somewhat healthy, with a slightly fuller build, but now he looked emaciated and worn down. Regardless of his appearance, I had no desire to see him again, and I felt a wave of disgust knowing he'd been waiting for me.
Were you waiting for me? Please stop, it's disturbing.
Well, I tried messaging and calling, but nothing would go through. Waiting outside your office was my only option. I don't even know where you live now. I really needed to see you.
His voice, once overbearing, now sounded weak and lacking energy.
So, what do you want? It must be something important if you went to this trouble. I have no reason to see you otherwise.
As I questioned him coldly, his face twisted as if he were about to cry.
Please, help me.
He pleaded.
Excuse me? Why on earth would I help you? I'm not interested.
I turned to leave, but Tucker desperately tried to stop me. Of course, I had no intention of listening, so I kept walking, but Tucker started talking anyway.
After our divorce, I actually got remarried to a younger woman. Her name's Miley.
Apparently, after our divorce and the loss of his promotion, Tucker went drinking to drown his sorrows and met Miley, a woman in her 20s. According to him, Miley was very cute, and they quickly started dating, marrying just a month into their relationship.
But after we got married, Miley completely changed. She's insanely possessive and emotionally unstable. If I try to tell her what to do, she breaks down crying and screaming. I can't handle it anymore.
Tucker said, his eyes hollow. Unable to resist, I smiled and told him.
Oh, so she changed after marriage, just like you did. Sounds like a perfect match. Good for you. She seems like the ideal woman for you.
It's not good at all. She keeps calling and texting me nonstop at work, even calling my office. If I don't respond or pick up, she throws a fit, accuses me of cheating. She even showed up at my office the other day.
As he spoke, Tucker's phone kept ringing with incoming calls.
You know, I thought Miley would be just like you, obeying whatever I said. She told me she was estranged from her family and had no one else. But boy, was I wrong. I can't live with someone as hysterical as her.
It seemed Tucker had hoped to turn Miley into another slave. I felt nothing but deep contempt for him, who never seemed to learn his lesson.
Your attitude is beyond disgusting. What do you think women are? This is karma. You got exactly what you deserved. Are you done talking? Because I'm leaving now.
Wait, I realized I need a woman as obedient as you. Let's get back together. I need you, Violet.
What?
Anger flared up at Tucker's ridiculous request.
Don't make me laugh. The only reason I stayed with you was so I could prepare to move out and cover the moving costs. I was just trying not to provoke you until I was ready to leave. I never once thought of myself as your slave. Why would I ever get back together with someone like you?
As I yelled, a woman ran over to us, shouting.
There you are.
Tucker's face froze as he recognized her.
Miley.
This woman, who must have been the infamous Miley, was indeed cute, but her eyes were bloodshot.
Tucker. Why haven't you been answering my calls? I told you to pick up within 3 rings.
She screeched in a high-pitched voice.
How did you know I was here?
Tucker asked in a trembling voice. Miley replied calmly.
I installed a GPS app on your phone, so I always know exactly where you are.
When did you put that app on my phone?
Ignoring Tucker's panicked questions, Miley turned her gaze to me with a piercing glare.
Hey. Who are you? What's your relationship with Tucker?
While I hesitated to answer, Miley turned to Tucker and pressed him.
Is this an affair? Are you cheating on me? Answer me.
Tucker looked at me with pleading eyes, but I had an idea for a bit of harmless payback.
Actually, this man was hitting on me, and it's been making me uncomfortable.
His face showed utter shock, but this little bit of revenge was harmless enough.
What? Hitting on someone? Tucker, what are you doing hitting on other women?
Just as I'd hoped, The word hitting on fueled Miley's anger, and she confronted him with a fierce expression.
No, it's a misunderstanding. I wasn't hitting on anyone.
Tucker tried to explain desperately, but Miley wasn't listening. She then snatched Tucker's phone from his jeans pocket and, within seconds, reset it to factory settings. As all his data disappeared, Tucker's voice was filled with despair.
No way. That had all my client contacts.
It's your own fault for flirting. And starting today, you get no allowance.
With that, Miley shouted and dragged the stunned Tucker away. After that, I heard that Miley began calling Tucker's office even more frequently, suspicious of infidelity. She even showed up there, only to be stopped by security, which made Tucker infamous around the workplace. Exhausted by his marriage with Miley, Tucker's work performance suffered, and I learned from his boss, Bob, that Tucker was eventually demoted. Even at his new post, Miley's constant calls made things uncomfortable for him from day one. As for me, a project I proposed at work received positive feedback, and I was offered a promotion to assistant manager, which I accepted. Though I'd thought I was done with romance, the director of the hospital where I'd gone for physical therapy invited me to dinner, and we recently went out. I don't know if it will turn into a relationship, but this time, I'm determined to choose wisely and find my own happiness.